a charitable platform, except it's stable, and the individuals are owning the place that they're living in. So something like that could possibly work as a solution of having a land trust. So if we have, just say in El Dorado County, there's a mobile home park of 40 units, and the owners all come together and decide they would like to buy that, and they formulate a land trust, which becomes basically a nonprofit, and they put the money into it, purchase the property on behalf of the nonprofit. Nonprofit, the land trust itself, owns the park. That would work.
That's the way my park is set up.
It is.
It's set up with a homeowner association, which was made up in 1998 when it started, of homeowners, and they pooled their money. Some people didn't have any money to put into it, so they became renters. HCD, Housing and Community Development State Agency, has millions of dollars in their coffers right now looking for places to put it where homeowners, they would like homeowners to be able to do that. And then we have two loans. We had one from HCD, which would be paid off the 1st of December this year. That could result in a decreased rent of $65 a month. In 2037, the HUD guaranteed loan will be paid off, which could result in with a final monthly payment, if it were as it is now, of $250 a month. And as the park owner down the line from me here was saying, we still have expenses, yes. And so we've got money set aside in a replacement reserve of near $1 million to cover those streets and infrastructure and so on. The hitch in all this is that it's hard to get park owners to sell to a homeowner group. And before I go any further, I would like to congratulate, applaud, and thank on behalf of other mobile homeowners, the two park owner groups who are here tonight, because you've done obviously a magnificent job. You've done a fair job, and I haven't heard of rents that low in other than homeowner-owned parks. And so thank you for what you're doing. And are there any other park owners here tonight beside those two?
There are.
Okay.
And they're watching the live stream, by the way. Streaming, yeah.
They're in the park. They're in here.
They're here and in live streaming right now.
All right. I haven't heard what your space rents are. I was thinking that if you were the only two here, it's ironic that the parks we probably don't have problems with, that are probably not on our radar as having high rent increases, are the ones who showed up here. We're not talking about you. We're talking about the new guys that come in and buy the parks, and they have a different outlook. They have a different mentality from the family ownership. You're trying to support your family. You are supporting your family. You're also performing a service to the community and to the people who live in your parks very happily. I never hear from anybody from your parks. I hear from these other parks who have just been bought and where the rent goes up. I'd also like to go back and address briefly what Doug Johnson stated about Humboldt County they only did their referendum, I think, about 3 years ago. I'd like to say about costs, as you notice on that briefing up there, they said that the costs, and we don't know what the costs would be for an SRSO here in your county. But as that briefing said, most of those costs, if not all of them, can be borne by the park owners and homeowners. And when it's spread across a lot of people like that, it doesn't amount to that kind of money for any one particular person. You won't know what it costs until you look into it. The one last thing was that those voluntary measures, they sound great. But being voluntary, there's no way to enforce them. And memorandums of understandings, the MOUs, From GSM Oil, I've never heard much good about those, but they're admirable to think about. So, and one other thing, that the health and safety issue is usually handled by HCD, and so the county doesn't get involved in that expense either.
Well, thanks, John. I'm gonna shift over. Andy, go ahead.
I wanted to address the notion that we're not talking about the rest of us. When a rent control ordinance is being floated, you are. 97% of the parks on this 56 park list, it seems, are indisputably not the problem. And perhaps, I've got conflicting information, but let's assume there are two, thereabouts, give or take, that do have excessive rent increases. A rent control ordinance does punish 100% of the park owners. And I can tell you from experience in Oregon, which is in its second year of statewide rent control for mobile home parks as well as multifamily real estate, rent increases are higher today than they were before. Because, at least in mobile home parks, where we monitor very closely annually various markets, we do market surveys. In the 5 years leading up to the new legislation at the state level, the average rent increase in a park in the state was about 4.1%. After it has been slightly higher, and the reason is for all these park owners who spent decades being measured and some years skipping rent increases altogether. We have a number of clients who skip rent increases. When a rent stabilization ordinance and rent control ordinance goes into play, they're basically put on notice, get what you can while you can, because you've been a laggard. That's a bad signal to send. That being said, I do agree that the voluntary programs are great, but not required. So if we're here to brainstorm about ideas to keep the ne'er-do-wells out of El Dorado County and to try to force all operators to work in the same kind of measured environment that most of us work in, I believe exactly what we're doing here and more things like this, maybe in less formal settings and so on and so forth. I know I've gone to groups, and Doug's gone to groups at the IHOP and talked to residents out in the hallways at places and parks that we might be stopping in to check out. And that bringing operators into the light keeps them honest. You know, they're less likely to act poorly if we all hold them accountable. And I can tell you from the folks who are up here representing park owners and many of those on the live stream, me and other operators in Northern California, this is our career. We don't want to put it in jeopardy. We want to find that difficult, artful balance of running a business while being empathetic for those who struggle. And I think what we need to do here, and hopefully we can move on, and I can cover this later, is some brainstorm topics about all matters of affordability in our communities. Not just rent included, but also utilities, financing problems. I think the HEAP program needs to be absolutely heralded in this county. I think it's the best thing I've seen in 2 states. I think every park should be telling everybody they know about it. It's a fantastic program. And I think there's a couple other things I want to come back to. I think you had a great idea that I'd like to build on. Frank has another one. Property taxes. I have an idea where the county could help both park owners and residents alike in a way that I think is symbiotic. And then we've talked a little bit about park expansions and what you could do to ensure affordability for adding spaces in this county, which at the end of the day, increasing supply is our only option here. So that's my piece.
So right now I've got 3 possible items that came out of just for brainstorming. So we have ordinance, land trust, increasing more spaces. What other items do you think of? Yep.
Well, it's not another idea, but I just kind of wanted to build on the land trust idea that you mentioned. I'm curious because that is seemed at the research that I've done and the field work I've done talking to folks is that seems to be the critical point when a park, you know, a park owner decides, hey, I want to retire, I want to sell the park. And there's a key moment in there. There are current state statutes that encourage, and there's state statutes and the loan fund that the Housing and Community Development has available, low interest, to help facilitate that, because the state has said, hey, we want to encourage this as well. But there seems to be a critical moment in there where the residents often just don't have the wherewithal or the reserves or the process set up to step into that ownership role. And so how valuable would a land trust be? Could we successfully help to use that to help, when park owners are ready to sell, to move it into a resident-owned park so that we don't lose that opportunity? Because the opportunity seems to often be lost. That happened in Diamond Springs, I know, in the park there. I understand they're struggling in another park right now to pull a plan together. So that's something I'd be interested in exploring with the park owners. How do we do that? Not that we want you to go out of business, but you do at some point, parks want to go for sale. And how do we encourage resident-owned and making that happen?
There's a two-part to that. It is, one, they may want to go to sell and feel like they can't because of capital gains. And if you go to a land trust, you can help them negate that capital gain where everybody wins.
Well, and you also negate the property tax increase, which is
Exactly.
exactly. So those two things are big advantages if you can get over that.
Right, so you take that out of the equation as well.
You could form a nonprofit.
Yes.
And that nonprofit could then do what the homeowners would have done, but don't, as you say, have the wherewithal, and that's something the county might be able to
Right.
approach. And that would benefit the seller as well as the homeowners who are left in the park.
Right. So we look around for where is that expertise. Hillary, are you in the audience? So, Hillary, sorry to put the spotlight on you. Hillary Mulligan has been hired by the foundation, and Hillary has a huge background in land trust. Because we know as a foundation, when we look at housing across El Dorado County, that this is the direction we're going to need to go into. And so that was one of the reasons why we reached out, and we were able, very fortunately, to recruit Hillary. So we look forward to having that engagement.
Right. The other one I'd love to build on, if you don't mind, is the one that, because we've had conversations, Andy and I have, and I've had a conversation with one of the supervisors, and the notion that we have, if you look at the trend line on the data over the last 20 years, that the number of mobile home units has dropped in our county. It's the last solid data was it went down 528 units from 1990 to 2010. I think over the last 10 years, based on the numbers that I just saw today, it looks like it's gone down at least another 500 over the last year. So over the last 20 years, very round numbers. I used to call these superintendent numbers. They were dangerous. About 1,000 units over that span of time. Well, we should be turning that around. And so what would be some ways to incentivize that? Working with county through county policy, is there a way to set up reduction in mitigation fees or impact fees? If you use the current footprint of and adjacent land to parks where there are owners and available land and interest in doing this, is there a way to expand the number of parking spots? I know there's a park in El Diamond Springs that recently on their own proceeded to add, I think, 14 or 15 spots. But if you could do that on a bigger scale, you already have the infrastructure there. The roads are there, the sewers are there, the water is there. You just have to expand it out a little bit. And or could you densify some of it? In some cases, there may be space already on the current footprint to expand and maybe put in smaller modular housing, more like cottages, to add to the stock of housing. And there may be a way to work with the county and the owners to explore how we could do that across the county to increase the number of units.
Shannon, you're nodding your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have something to add to that. So I recently had a conversation, this is pre-COVID, but in 2020 had a conversation with a colleague who was looking to purchase some property, and his concept was putting in tiny homes, which AKA the park models, so it's still going to be a mobile home type setup where you need the pedestals, you need the electrical, you need the water, sewer, all of that. The roads to the area were paved. It was relatively accessible property. It wasn't somewhere out, Pleasant Valley, where you have to do a lot of improvement, but the cost per space, regardless of whether it's a park model or a double wide, you still need to get the services to that space. And the cost was going to be between $80,000 and $85,000 per space. That did not include the land, and that did not include the homes. And so there are, you know, some conversations to be had with the county, making it more within reach for somebody, a park owner or an investor, which I know you don't want to hear that word, but somebody who has the means to start the project for the homes to come in. At the $85,000 price tag without the property cost, you're looking at a minimum of 8 to 10 years to recover your investment on rents that currently are being charged in El Dorado County. So that doesn't look very appealing to somebody who is going to, you know, expand their park or to start another park of sorts. So
Great insight and great information. That just drives another conversation.
But
To see
before-
where that funding is being generated. Why is that 8,000 or
right.
8,500?
And you can, Shannon, we could make a good argument together that, again, if you're using the current footprint or adjacent property to an existing footprint of a park, that the mitigation, the impact is less as far as fees. Why?
Right,
Because
right.
you've already got roads and sewers and part of it already there. And so road impact fees and other things. So there may be a way through
we
further
have a double
discussion.
layer also because we are under the jurisdiction of the state. And so yes, we do still have to follow county guidelines, but we also have to, all of our permitting process and all of that goes through the state ultimately.
So is
we
that
have-
8,000 if both county and state?
Mhm.
Okay.
To be clear, the state doesn't charge impact fees.
No.
At WMA, we've hired consultants to try to find solutions here. I think this is a fantastic avenue. We should pursue this. The state fees are quite minimal. It's the county that really controls the impact fees, and I think it's not deliberate, in my opinion. I think what it is that the planning departments that you have are looking at housing in mass and not necessarily as tiny villages or expanded mobile home parks or new mobile home parks or public-private partnerships with manufactured housing, things like that. And what they're doing is they're applying the same metrics to mobile home development, whether in a mobile home park or otherwise, as they would to a traditionally stick-built house, which might have 2 or 3 times the square footage, 2 or 3 times the plumbing connections. In a senior park, they're not impacting schools as much as an all-age park might be, so on and so forth, but they're still being charged all the same impact fees. So it's an issue we've been pursuing for a long time. I would love to have a willing partner in the county in this group to try to promote that type of thing. I think there's some real opportunity there, and as I also think the tiny home villages, we've promoted something called educator villages down in Sacramento. Didn't get very far bureaucratically, but the concept could be expanded into other areas where maybe a public-private partnership might be able to come together in the county, where the county has some land that's underutilized, and there is an operator or someone else who might be able to come in and create deed-restricted, permanently affordable housing solutions for people who are qualified and means-tested and so on. And there could be a kind of a de minimis space rent that could be bond funded. We've done all this analysis to see how this might work for educators, but I don't see why it couldn't work for more a broader audience in the county.
I think a trend line is starting to develop in different communities along this line of how do you maximize the potential of utilization of things that are already in place. The foundation is now accepting sewer credits for South Lake Tahoe. So we're now taking those sewer credits in, and we will give them back out again for affordable housing, and they will be deed restricted. So it's taking different approaches to things that are utility structures and that impact that it has on community, and how do we turn that into something that's also philanthropic, that we can turn around, deed restrict, and give back to somebody to create affordable home. So we come back to the conversation about stabilization of what people are having to pay. Any more brainstorming ideas, Tamara?
Nope.
Doug?
Yeah, I'll bring up two. I don't think we've talked about this tonight, but they're very successful and they work, and that's rental assistance programs. I know all the park owners I'm looking at out here, and most of them, I know they offer some sort of rental assistance, some more formal than others, some less. I know park owners live stream watching offer programs. How can we expand that? How do we expand that and make it more countywide and make that ability to help those people, target those people who really are in need, who need help? We want to be a part of that help. And the park owners have done this for years. They do it privately, like I said, some more publicly. How do we make that more of a countywide effort? Make it more public, publicize it, broaden it, so that we can help more and more people.
Go
And
ahead.
then real quick, my second one is, let's bring back the task force that we had 20 years ago. Why don't we do that? Why doesn't the board created a task force 20 years ago that I served on. It had a host of county staffers, it had a host of resident representatives. Why don't we bring that back? Make that a permanent committee that we meet, maybe first once a month, and then quarterly, whatever it takes. But why don't we keep this dialogue going on a more formal basis? It could still be public meetings. All those meetings were public. We met in a big conference room in the government center, and it worked. It opened up lines of communication. It dispelled myths. People were able to deal with facts, not fiction. And we were really able to reach out and help people and bring people together. I say, let's bring that back.
So to your point on the rental assistance program, I know Pam Hagan, I turned around and saw Pam, and Pam, and Carl here. Pam is a past employee of the foundation, and as a foundation, we did rental assistance, and Pam was very much a part of that process, and we were overwhelmed within a very short period of time with the amount of need in the community. For us to go back into that, which is what we did during the pandemic, because that's what was occurring. People were being laid off from work and had no income to pay for their rent. And although there was a moratorium, eventually that still has to get paid. So we worked not only here on the West Slope, but also in South Lake Tahoe with Tahoe Magic to make sure people were able to stay in their home. So we have engaged in rent programs, and we'd be happy to lead another one again. Go ahead, Tamara.
I was going to say, as much as I appreciate assistance programs, we're not looking for someone to hold our hand. We're looking for protection from the predators. We're not looking for protection from these folks. These are not the people we're looking for protection from. And I'm afraid that rental assistance is great for those who are willing to cooperate. But what about the ones who aren't? And that's my concern. And that's why I'm here today. It's not about Doug and Andy and Sharon. These are not the people I'm here about today. I'm here about the people who take advantage intentionally of these folks and what kind of teeth measures we can use to prevent them from doing that in the county and discourage from others from coming to our county. I love the subsidy programs and they're helpful for people, but we're all, and this is non-offensively said, we're all grown-ups. We're not looking for somebody to give us a handout or to help us. We're looking for reasonable rent security. That's what we're truly looking for. Now, if the county could come up with guidelines that had teeth for a rental assistance program, I'd be thrilled. But to leave it on the caprice of an owner, I am not comfortable.
I think that the time is right for you to conduct a rent survey. I've heard, I think from Tamara, that there's a group that's already put together that has this in mind. And to me, that's the obvious next step, because you've got some, I can't believe it, the parks I've heard about already, and the rents, the reasonable rents they're charging. So as I said, the ones I hear about are on the other extreme. And so I think whatever else you do, please conduct a rent survey. They're not difficult. I've done them myself. Not like you should do them, but it's not brain surgery to find out what the rent's been. You want to go back 5 years, 10 years, 15, whatever it is. I think that's obviously the next step.
I agree, couldn't agree more. Frank, this is where Housing Eldorado comes in. So there's a partnership that we're entering into with Housing Eldorado to do a very comprehensive housing study on the Western Slope. It'll begin in late fall. It'll go for 6 months. It's going to cost about $160,000 to $175,000. We have already talked to the consultant who has a lot of skill sets in doing a lot of these housing surveys across the United States. We're already on the books, and we will start that process